In a congressional hearing regarding crime in Washington, D.C., Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert makes a fool of herself again. And the again part is the problem here. There was no reason for this to happen. There was no reason her staff couldn't have fact-checked her talking points before she pursued this really bizarre line of questioning against Mr. Allen.
Mr. Allen, based on these statistics, I would like to talk to you about some other things that are going on here in Washington, D.C., specifically an initiative that you led. In November of 2022, you led the charge to reform D.C.'s crime laws. Is that correct?
I chaired the committee that proposal came through.
You led this charge, yes, sir. And these changes are now law here in D.C., correct?
Do you mean the revised criminal code?
Yes.
No, those are not the law.
Those are not the law.
But the reason things like this happen is because Boebert's party is more concerned with optics and culture wars than they are about actually doing anything that would improve the lives of Americans in a meaningful way. If their hearts were in the right place, and I honestly believe this, they simply wouldn't be making these sorts of gaffes, if only because if they cared about the work they were doing, they would be a little bit more diligent and a little bit more fastidious in their fact-finding.
The revised criminal code was rejected by...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm talking to Mr. Allen.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Allen, did you or did you not decriminalize public urination in
No, we did
Washington,
not.
D.C.? Did you lead the charge to do so?
No, the revised criminal code left that as a criminal charge.
Did you lead the charge to decriminalize public urination in Washington, D.C.?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever vote in favor of decriminalizing public urination in Washington, D.C.?
The revised criminal code that was passed by the council
support?
kept it as a criminal offense.
And you support this?
I voted for it, yes.
Moments like these are born from disingenuous political campaigns, when public officials have to either fabricate a story where there isn't one, or hyperbolize a story that isn't, on its own, as scandalous as they would like you to believe it is. So in this clip, we're seeing Congresswoman Boebert question D.C. City Councilman Charles Allen on his voting record. She's trying to prove that Allen is weak on crime and that he has some sick agenda to allow public urination in D.C. She asked him repeatedly if he, quote, led the charge on decriminalizing public urination. He did not. He and the hearing's chairman clarified that public urination had not been decriminalized in D.C. as Boebert asserted. When Mr. Allen was finally allowed to speak after repeatedly being interrupted by Boebert, he explained that the legislation Boebert was referring to came from a criminal code reform commission that changed public urination from a criminal to a civil offense, but the council that Allen chaired maintained it as a criminal offense.
You voted to keep it as a criminal offense.
That's correct. The full council did.
We have records that show that you were in favor of removing that criminal offense and allowing public urination.
No,
Is that something that you intend to pursue in the future?
No. The legislation you're referring to that came from the Criminal Code Reform Commission changed public urination from a criminal to a civil offense. The council then changed that to maintain it as a criminal offense at the request of the mayor.
Thank you. I yield.
It's something so simple, and I'm sure there are records to support Mr. Allen's testimony, records that would have been accessible to Boebert and her staff during their preparation for this hearing. It's also a strange angle to take, essentially attempting to paint this DC councilman as being pro-public urination, crusading for the rights of people to piss in public. And maybe there's an imposter syndrome angle here too. Lauren Boebert clearly hasn't earned the right to represent Americans, and she's clearly way out of her league as far as intellect or competence goes. She got her seat as a congresswoman because Ted Cruz thought she was good for headlines, which she is. But the work she's doing in Washington is incredibly disrespectful to her constituents and frankly to all of us. This is no more evident than when she's interrogating someone who clearly knows what he's talking about. And I'm not just talking about Mr. Allen or this particular incident. Anytime any of these PR stunt Congress people are up against actual experts and professionals, they falter because their lack of knowledge and decorum is on full display. Their normal tricks of constantly interrupting people and putting words into people's mouths simply doesn't work against people who are well versed in the subject matter. That's how you get failed gotcha moments like this one. Anyway, this is all part of a larger narrative where House GOP members are attempting to use Washington, D.C., which is run by Democrats, as a symbol of all major American cities, most of which are run by Democrats. They're attempting to make the overly simplistic argument that Democrats aren't good at running cities because cities are high in crime. Of course, there are a number of reasons as to why crime is higher in cities than in rural areas, including some very, very obvious ones that I don't think I need to point out, but Republicans aren't focusing on those. There are also plenty of ways that crime could potentially be reduced in cities, but Congress isn't ready to talk about those. Instead, they want to be tough on crime, as though crime is an isolated phenomenon in society and not a symptom of systemic failures across an entire nation. Still, the narrative is that Democrats can't handle crime, and they're using D.C. as their shining example of a poorly run Democratic city, despite the fact that D.C. doesn't run like any other American city. While there is a statistical increase in crime in the area, D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson denies that there's any quote-unquote crisis to speak of, reminding members of Congress that the number of violent crime incidents have dropped 45% in the past 10 years. He also went on to say that since Washington, D.C. is not a state, its local crimes are prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is federally appointed. Last year, the office declined to prosecute 67% of D.C. arrests, which Mendelson said was, quote, enormously frustrating. If you zoom even further out, American cities probably are in some kind of crisis, but not one that's going to be solved with more cops or more guns or whatever other supposed solutions that are usually thrown at us. Unfortunately, urban planning and design aren't really high on Congress's priorities because those types of solutions require large overhauls, not just to infrastructure and landscapes, but to culture and thinking. They can't be achieved with small changes here and there, which means that individual members of Congress can't champion one or two very acute projects and stick them on their political resumes. But I think it's fair to say that whatever problems our cities are facing, they won't be solved with Band-Aids, and they certainly won't be solved with our current congressional brain drain. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe, and be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you.